Today I'm going to show you the family tree of the Seljuk dynasty, which was the major power in Turkey prior to the Ottomans. I'll be using my Asian royal family trees chart, which is available as a poster from my website usefulcharts.com. This video is a two-channel collaboration with Hikma History. Whereas I'll be talking about the Seljuk family tree, Hikma History will be going into detail on the Battle of Manzikert, a very important battle between the Byzantines and the Seljuks, which ended up being a major turning point in history. So make sure you watch that video after this one. You'll find the link at the end of the video as well as in the description. Before we look at the Seljuks, I want to explain the difference between a caliph and a sultan. So you probably already know that both terms are used for Muslim leaders. The term caliph came first. If we go up to the top of the chart, you'll find the Prophet Muhammad as well as his close family members. Then you'll see a bunch of caliphs, all of whom are connected to him one way or another. Basically, the caliphs were his direct successors. And after his death, they served both as the religious leaders as well as political leaders. Over time, the political aspect became more and more important, and the entire territory controlled by Islam was called the Caliphate, with the Caliph as its main ruler. So after the first few Rashidun caliphs, there were two main caliphates. The Umayyad Caliphate with its capital in Syria, and then the Abbasid Caliphate with its capital at Baghdad. It was during the early Abbasid rule that the Islamic world experienced its golden age. But eventually the caliphs started to decrease in power, and various generals from other dynasties started to increase in power. Many of these military leaders were Turks. On this chart, Turkic leaders are shown in dark red, whereas Arabic leaders are shown in green. Eventually, things got to a point where the Arabic caliphs were more like figureheads, and the real power was held by various Turkic military leaders. And this is where the term sultan comes in. The word means strength or protector, and it came to be used by Islamic leaders that were more powerful than the caliph, but technically still below him in rank. So the first person to use the title Sultan was not a Seljuk. It was Mahmud of Ghazni, founder of the Ghaznavid dynasty. That dynasty flourished just a little bit before the Seljuk dynasty and then was also contemporary with it. However, the Ghaznavids were based a little more toward the east, closer to modern Pakistan, whereas the Seljuks were based in what is today Iran. So, although the Ghaznavids were the first to use the title of Sultan, the Seljuks quickly followed suit and, in fact, became the more powerful sultans. So let's start with Tughril, the first Seljuk Sultan. Although he was the founder of the Seljuk Empire, the dynasty itself takes its name from his grandfather. What Tughril did was basically unite a bunch of Turkic tribes and then lead them to conquer Persia as well as the Abbasid capital of Baghdad. By the time Tughril did this, the caliph had very little power anyway, and the area was being controlled by a people called the Buyids. But Tughril defeated the Buyids and became the new top man in the region. He was succeeded by his nephew, Alp Arslan, who continued to expand the Seljuk Empire. Now, if you are, like me, a fan of the Narnia books, you might be wondering if there's a connection between Arslan and Aslan, and indeed there is. They are two different ways to pronounce the same word, which means lion in Turkish. Alp Arslan's main accomplishment was his victory at the Battle of Manzikert. This battle was between the Seljuks and the Byzantines, led by Romanos IV, who was also supported by several other European fighters, including some Franks and Normans. Hikma History has made a video that goes into the battle in detail, and I encourage you to watch it because it truly was a turning point in both European and Middle Eastern history. From that point on, the area we now call Turkey was dominated by Turks as opposed to Greeks. Alp Arslan died just 1 year after the Battle of Manzikert, and soon thereafter the Seljuks actually split into two separate empires. The main part of the empire, called the Great Seljuk Empire, was inherited by his son Malik Shah. But over in the newly conquered territory in Turkey, a leader by the name of Süleyman eventually established a breakaway state known as the Sultanate of Rum. Rum meaning Rome, because most of the territory had previously been part of the Byzantine, aka the Roman Empire. You can see here that both branches of the dynasty trace their origins back to the same ancestor. Suleiman's father, Kutalmish, was first cousin to Tughril, and in fact had fought against Alp Arslan for the title of Sultan. He was never successful though, but his son was. But instead of becoming Sultan of the entire Seljuk Empire, the empire was basically divided in two. Let's look at this side first. During the reign of Malik Shah, the real power behind the throne was a man named Nizam al-Mulk. He had been the vizier or prime minister under Alp Arslan and continued in that role under Malik Shah. Nizam al-Mulk was also a scholar and is generally thought to have been an excellent statesman. I should also point out these two marriages here between Seljuk princesses and caliphs. They demonstrate that there was a delicate balance between the power of the sultans and the power of the caliphs, and that marriages were seen as a way to strengthen the ties between the two. I'll also point out that Malik Shah is kind of a perfect name because Malik means king in Arabic and Shah means king in Persian. So basically Malik Shah means king. And what's even more interesting is that one of the main things that the Turks gave to the world is the fact that they blended Arabic culture with Persian culture to create something new. And this name kind of sums up that whole process nicely. Malik Shah was assassinated in 1092 under mysterious circumstances. What followed was a lot of infighting between his various sons over control of the empire. Basically, the empire started to get carved up and decline. There were several decades of stability under the reign of his son Ahmad Sanjar, but after his death, the great Seljuk Empire pretty much ceased to exist. You'll also notice a marriage here between a Seljuk princess and a Ghaznavid sultan, so there was at least one example of intermarriage between these two dynasties. Okay, now let's look at the Sultanate of Rum. After Suleiman I died, the Sultanate of Rum actually reunited with the Great Seljuk Empire for a brief period until the death of Malik Shah. But then at that point, Suleiman's son Kilij Arslan took charge over here, and there were two separate sultans again. The Sultans of Rum were important figures when it comes to the Crusades. Before the actual First Crusade, there was a smaller crusade known as the People's Crusade. That group of crusaders fought against Kilij Arslan, and Kilij Arslan soundly defeated them. But then, when the more well-prepared First Crusade arrived, they faced Kilij Arslan again, and this time they won several battles. But by the time the Crusaders reached Jerusalem, which was their main target, Khalid Arslan was no longer in charge there. You see, there was a third player on the scene, the Fatimid Caliphate. The Fatimids were Shia Muslims and the Seljuks were Sunni Muslims. So they actually fought against each other in addition to both fighting against the Christians. By the time the Crusaders reached Jerusalem, the city had actually switched from Seljuk control to Fatimid control. So it was actually the Fatimids that were defeated there, not the Seljuks. But after the First Crusade and before the Second Crusade, there was actually another mini in-between crusade known as the Crusade of 1101. In that crusade, the Europeans fought against Khalid Arslan and lost. So sometimes the Crusaders won, sometimes the Seljuks won. It was really quite back and forth. In the end, though, Khalid Arslan died fighting against his distant cousin, Muhammad Tapar. After Khalid Arslan I, we get Malik Shah, not to be confused with the more famous Malik Shah over here, and then his brother Masud. Masud was the Seljuk Sultan during the Second Crusade, which he basically won. He was followed by his son Khalid Arslan II, who was involved in the Third Crusade. So basically we have a First Crusade leader, Second Crusade leader, and Third Crusade leader. After Khalid Arslan II, there was some infighting within the family for control of the Sultanate. First, Khusra held power, then his brother Suleiman II, then his son Khalid Arslan III, and then it went back to Khusra. During all this turmoil, there was actually a Fourth Crusade, but strangely, the Fourth Crusade never made it to Seljuk territory. Instead, the Latin Crusaders ended up taking the city of Constantinople from the Byzantines for a few decades. Eventually, we come to Khosrau I. He was Sultan during the Fifth Crusade. Now, in the Fifth Crusade, the Seljuks actually allied with the Crusaders against a common enemy, the Ayyubids, who had previously taken over from the Fatimids. This time, both the Seljuks and the Crusaders lost together, with the Ayyubids emerging as the main winners. From this point forward, the Sultanate of Rum started to decline in power. Of course, in the next century, a new Turkic power would arise to take its place, the Ottomans. I have a separate video in which I go through the Ottoman family tree, which I'll link to in the description. In that video, I pointed out that there's actually a blood connection between the Seljuks and the Ottomans. If we go 2 generations down from this sultan, we get a Halim Hatun, who married Ertugrul. They were the parents of Osman I, founder of the Ottoman dynasty. So that was a look at the Seljuk dynasty. Please remember to click on the link at the end of the video or in the description to view another video on the Seljuks by fellow YouTuber Hikma History.